To bystanders, it looks like a loving father buying a soda for his child in a convenience store. But in reality, it's a key piece of evidence in a chilling kidnapping and multiple murder.
I remember just holding on to hope, but still feeling like there wasn't going to be any.
A little girl far from home, abducted and under the full control of a savage, psychotic serial killer, Joseph Edward Duncan. Her innocent eyes have already seen up close what this monster can do.
Joseph Duncan walked up to him with the gun and he was like, "No, please don't," and then he shot him in the head.
But today, 18-year-old Shasta Groene, a survivor and a mother-to-be, finally speaks the shocking words that she's waited to say for 10 long years. And she tells her story only to Crime Watch Daily and our Melissa Moore.
Do you remember much of that night, or is it just a blur?
I remember it like it was yesterday. I can't stress enough how much, someone could not forget.
8-year-old Shasta Groene is the baby of the family. Living with 2 older brothers, her mother Brenda and her stepfather Mark Mackenzie in this small house near Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. She remembers their last night at home like it was yesterday.
We had a barbecue and we had family there, and so we just went to sleep like it was a normal night. The next day we had to wake up for school.
No one in this happy young family remotely suspects that they have been closely observed for days. Stalked by a hidden dark presence, Joseph Edward Duncan, a serial killer on the loose. He will later confess to the rape and murder of 3 young children in the last 9 years, but police don't know that yet. Nobody knows his motives for singling out Shasta's family, but he approaches at sunrise the next morning, full of evil intent and armed with a hammer. Shasta wakes up to her mother calling her.
She had actually come into the room and woke us up and said that there's a man here that doesn't want us to be here. And when I went into the living room, I had seen Joseph Duncan. He was very protected and in all black.
The family believes that Duncan only wants money.
My stepdad Mark had said, "We don't have money," because Mark had raised his voice. He had said, "Don't raise your voice or I'm gonna shoot you in the head." That scared me a lot.
But Duncan doesn't want money. He binds the hands and feet of the adults and Shasta's 13-year-old brother Slade with zip ties as they lie face down on the floor. He then ties the wrists of Shasta and her 9-year-old brother Dylan and leads them out of the house. Then he goes back inside with the hammer.
I remember hearing my mom, she went to go yell, but didn't have the time to. And then I heard my stepdad Mark. We were hearing bangs, and then he was screaming and yelling. At that point I had started crying. I had just gotten really scared.
As Shasta watches in horror, her brother Slade comes running around the side of the house. He has gotten free of his restraints, but not from Duncan.
His head was just covered in blood and just dripping down the front of him. And then we saw Joseph Duncan come out the back door and attack him.
Duncan hustles the 2 small children into his Jeep nearby. Shasta looks back at her mortally wounded brother Slade, who has dragged himself to a picnic table in the yard.
He was sitting on the picnic table and he was just, sitting up, and then he just laid down.
The next day, a neighbour spots blood on the front door of the house and calls police. They find the bodies of Shasta's mother and stepfather and Slade, all killed by blunt force trauma to the head.
There was blood transfers, blood drops, blood stains, virtually throughout the house. Numerous, very severe bludgeon injuries, and a great deal of blood.
Shasta and her brother have no idea of the fate of their family, but now they are on the run with a madman behind the wheel and police searching for them in vain.
We did all that we could do to get the names of Shasta and Dylan and their images across the nation in an effort to try to generate some sort of lead. I believed that we were going to find those kids. I had to believe that.
Duncan takes the children across state lines 100 miles away to a remote campground outside St. Regis, Montana.
When we were going to the bathroom, he watched us, and that made me really uncomfortable because at that point I knew that his intentions were just evil.
The horror continues, with Duncan's rage focused particularly on 9-year-old Dylan.
He got really mad, started throwing things. He took more of his anger out on Dylan and was really mean to him.
Shasta begins to realise where it's all headed.
I felt like I was gonna have to fight for my life.
And she is even more terrified when Duncan reveals the truth about her family in a fit of anger.
He grabbed the hammer, he said, "See this hammer?" And we said, "Yeah," and he was like, "This is the hammer that I murdered your mom and your stepdad and your brother with." And he was like, "They're not alive and you're never gonna see them again."
Did you just cry?
Yes, I cried a lot. Yeah. Sorry, honey, it's okay.
No, it's okay to cry. I mean, it's your mom.
I'm so sorry.
So
Thank
sorry.
you.
No child should ever have to endure that. I'm so sorry. That's the first time I've ever heard what you endure. You know, I knew it was bad.
8 years old, in the midst of a horror that few people could even comprehend, Shasta somehow rallies and begins to take charge, using every defence she can come up with to keep her and 9-year-old Dylan alive.
I said, "I promise that we're gonna make it out alive." So that was my way of comforting my brother, just letting him know that like we would never stop fighting.
8-year-old Shasta Groene and her 9-year-old brother Dylan are in the clutches of a psychotic serial killer.
It felt like forever, you know, waking up every day not knowing if you're gonna be alive the next.
Joseph Edward Duncan has murdered their mother and stepfather and their 13-year-old brother Slade.
Did Duncan ever threaten to kill you?
He did on several occasions if we didn't, you know, do what he said.
Now he's kidnapped Shasta and Dylan and holds them at a remote Montana campground in a nightmare of sexual abuse and torture.
He just went ballistic pretty much. He put us into the red Jeep and he proceeded to do nasty, horrible things to us.
And as Shasta tells our Melissa Moore, every passing day brings them closer to a terrible end.
If me and Dylan ever seemed more interested in each other and what each other was doing, and we weren't showing interest in him, he would get very upset.
Dylan becomes a target for Duncan's rage and abuse.
He took more of his anger out on Dylan and was really mean to him and just beat him up and, you know, just stuff like that. And so I think after a certain amount of time, Dylan had started to lose hope that it was going to turn out good for him. So I kind of, instead of taking like the little sister role and having him comfort me, I kind of took that over and just ensured him all the time that he was strong and that we'd make it through it.
And Shasta uses every psychological tool at her command to survive and keep Duncan at bay.
I would ask Joseph Duncan questions about his life, would ask him about his family and, you know, ask questions like, you know, could I meet them one day? And he did start to be more nice to us. Like there was a couple of times where he was like, "I'm gonna take you home." And so for me, that was like a good step.
He's already killed their stepdad, but now Duncan encourages them to write a letter to their biological father, Steve Groene.
"Dear Dad, I miss you very much, and me and Dylan know what happened to Mom, Mark, and Slade, and we both feel very sorry for them, and we both miss you and Jesse and Vance, and we might see you guys again."
But the letter is never sent.
But I think that was like another way to confuse us, because he just wanted us to believe that there was a chance that we would live or that we'd get out safe.
And a few days later, Duncan pulls out his shotgun with Dylan at close range. He fires and hits him in the stomach.
All of a sudden I just heard this loud bang. I was just frozen, like I didn't know what to do, and Joseph Duncan walked up to him with the gun and he was like, "No, please don't."
But Shasta can't stop the madman. He fires again and her brother is gone.
I couldn't even say anything. Like, I couldn't scream. I just didn't even know what to do. And so he came up to me, and Joseph Duncan was crying. He said it was an accident. He didn't mean to. I didn't know what the first shot was, but I knew that the second time was on purpose. He said that he did it so that Dylan wouldn't have to feel pain. So I was just confused, and I remember, like, I think for about a week I just didn't talk. I couldn't talk. I couldn't say anything. I was just frozen.
8-year-old Shasta Groene is in a fight for her life. Abducted by heartless serial killer Joseph Edward Duncan, she is now on her own after watching him murder her family and gun down her 9-year-old brother, Dylan. And now, only days later, Duncan turns his sights on her.
He was like, how do you want to die? And he was like, just like, you have the choice to be strangled, or you have the choice to be shot like your brother, and that one's gonna be quicker. Like, you won't feel pain. I felt like if I had chose the strangulation, that I might have a chance to talk him out of what he was doing. And so he laid me on the ground and put a rope around my neck, and he just pulled it super, super tight. And I remember everything like going, it was like going white, kind of like black and white, and I just couldn't really see anything anymore. But I had worked up enough breath to say, please don't, Jet.
Jet is Duncan's nickname, and now, in a desperate last-second gamble to save herself, she calls it out loud.
I noticed that when I would use that name with him, it would like soften a little bit, like it would soften him. And he's like, what did you say? And he had let go, and everything was starting to come back, and I was just really dizzy.
Somehow, this helpless child finds her way deep into the twisted mind of a crazed killer and switches off his murderous rage.
I said, please don't, Jet, and he started crying, and he was like, I can't do this.
Then, after 4 long weeks at the camp, he makes an offer that she can scarcely believe.
He had said that he wanted to take me home. He's like, I want to take you to meet my mom. Would you meet her? And I had said, yes, I'll meet your mom.
Approaching Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, they stop at a convenience store in Kellogg where a surveillance camera captures them on tape.
This is you in the surveillance. Do you remember that moment?
Yeah, I do.
Who's that little girl?
I was scared and just lost, and I remember just holding on to hope, but still feeling like there wasn't going to be any.
They get closer to home, but Shasta knows that a single wrong move can trigger the monster in Joseph Duncan.
He drove past my school, like my elementary school that I went to. He drove past one of my best friend's houses, and just I remember thinking like, okay, I can jump out right now and just go knock on her door and, you know, just beg her to help me.
As you were driving into Coeur d'Alene, did you see the first missing billboard?
Yeah, I remember seeing it, and I remember feeling sad because I had my brother's face on it and he wasn't with me anymore. I remember like thinking about how my family was, you know, probably looking for us.
They reach Coeur d'Alene around 2 a.m. and stop at the local Denny's to eat. Waitress Amber Dean takes their order, but she doesn't take her eyes off Shasta.
They were my only table at the time, and I immediately recognized her. He was what I call dead in the eyes. No emotion, no nothing. His entire world revolved around her. She didn't speak without his permission. Something about the dynamic between the two, it set the hairs on the back of your neck up immediately. There was something just not okay.
Shasta orders a milkshake. Amber heads for the phone.
I'd spoken to my manager, said, you know, I think we should probably call Coeur d'Alene PD. I'm pretty positive that's Shasta Groene over there. I'll take full responsibility. I'll pay for their meal if I'm wrong. We need to get somebody up here.
Amber stalls the food order while manager Linda Olson makes the call.
I've got a little girl here with a tall gentleman, and she looks so much like that Shasta.
Okay, are they still in the building?
And we're not sure, you know. She looks so much like her, and I don't know.
All right, we'll have someone start that way.
So you're sitting at the table across from Duncan, and you see a police officer enter the restaurant. What was your first thought?
I was scared. I remember thinking that Joseph Duncan, he's so smart, and I was like, so even if even if they know that I'm with him, that maybe he will have an excuse and they'll just leave and they won't think that anything was wrong. You know, that's just my 8-year-old mind thinking.
But Shasta can hardly believe what happens next.
The cop had asked me what my name was, and I had looked at Joseph Duncan, and he said, "You can tell him." So Joseph Duncan actually told me, "You can tell him." And so I had, you know, said Shasta, and that's when he had, you know, told Joseph Duncan to stand up. And so it was just, after that happened, it was just almost like a sigh of relief.
Police take Duncan outside and ask Amber to sit with Shasta.
I said, "Denny, is your brother in the car?" And she said, "No. He's in heaven with Mom and Dad," I think is what it was. And I just, you know, my heart kind of broke, and I just held her and let her know that she was safe. She was going to see her dad again soon, and it was all over.
Shasta's long nightmare is finally finished, thanks largely to her own will to survive.
Shasta had an amazing ability to somehow communicate with Mr. Duncan and build some sort of a bond with him that I think protected her, even to a point control him to some degree. We believe that it was Shasta that convinced Mr. Duncan to stop at the Denny's restaurant and basically orchestrated her own rescue by doing that.
Joseph Duncan was found guilty in the murders of Shasta's family and confessed to 3 prior child killings. He is sitting on death row in a federal penitentiary. But for Shasta, being a survivor hasn't been easy.
For the longest time, I was so scared to just go and be anywhere by myself. Some of the choices that I had made to try to cover pain and hide the pain and deal with it in, you know, not so appropriate ways.
Today, she's moved on with her life, with a baby on the way and looking to a bright future after reuniting with her biological father.
I think that we have a super strong relationship, especially after everything I went through. It brought us really close together. And, you know, now he's just, I mean, he's really excited to be having another grandbaby.
But Shasta still hasn't forgotten Joseph Duncan's last haunting request as he was led away by police.
I remember him asking me, "When you get older, promise me that you will come see me wherever I am." And I said, "I promise." I have actually talked to a couple people about actually making that happen.
So when you sit in front of him at some point in your future, what do you want to say to Joseph Duncan?
I don't hate him for the things that he's done. I forgive him, actually. At some point in my life, I had to come to the conclusion that I'm always going to, if I don't forgive him, then he's going to control my life in some way or another. He's always going to be in my thoughts. I still have the intentions of facing him again and telling him, "This is what you did to him and my family, and this is how I feel about it," you know. But also, I want him to know that I'm doing good things with my life too, so that he knows that he doesn't control my life and that he doesn't affect me anymore.